Thanks for pressing play on the Michael Welch podcast. Today, touching base on Kevin Durant and his debut as a Phoenix Sun, Anthony Davis trying to make history, and possible rule changes for college football. Touching on those subjects before heading towards March Madness next week. Thanks for tuning in. Here we go. Kevin Durant made his debut on Wednesday night with the Phoenix Suns in Charlotte against the Hornets. They were shorthanded with Lonzo Ball suffering a season-ending ankle injury on Monday night, unfortunately. Durant himself on a minutes restriction. The Suns have been shorthanded with him being out with an injury since early January, I believe it was. Of course, he was out for Brooklyn. And then been out for the Suns since the trade. So the Suns have been playing shorthanded since they moved the pieces in order to acquire him there. Booker, Chris Paul, Aiden, and Josh Okogie were the starting lineup with Durant in there. And the Suns now have 3 of the top 6 jump shooters of the past 2 seasons, along with Joel Embiid, DeMar DeRozan, and Brandon Ingram on that list with Chris Paul, Durant, and Booker. So we'll see one of the few teams in the league that's going to hit a lot of those kind of mid-range jumpers. He took the first shot of the game for the Suns here, missed it. It was a pretty horrible shooting in the first couple minutes there to start, and the Suns led 9-0 after the first time out. But Kevin Durant had a nice block early, 5 points right off the bat, off of some poor defensive setups there by the Hornets, getting back in transition. And he only played 6 minutes in the first quarter, but did a great job. Looks great coming back off of his injury. And they do all these minute restrictions and for guys coming back. From the player's perspective, I certainly understand wanting to kind of get back into shape and not wanting to risk re-injury. Although sometimes I think that's a little overblown. And through the extended time off, they really should just be ready to step back on the court and play again. And for the fans, we have to adjust to not seeing a player that we enjoy for an extended stretch of games. And then when he does come back, sometimes even that's a little bit sketchy and tentative. Although in this case, Durant seemed to be really itching to get back. So he's returning on a road trip here. But then they come back in limited capacity, and that's no fun either. And that's a whole nother discussion, I suppose, with too much load management and perhaps nursing these injuries more than need be. But as it went, Durant solid in his return. After he hit the bench in the first quarter there, the Hornets finally started generating some offense. They were down close to 20 points for a good chunk in the game, but they were able to hang around all the way up until the end there, although it never really seemed like the Suns would let off the gas. 12 points on 5 of 8 shooting in the first 13 minutes in the first half for Kevin Durant, 3 boards, 2 good blocks. Really looked pretty good on both sides of the ball. Good playing time with Devin Booker, who finished the game 15 of 26 for 37 points, 7 assists and 6 rebounds. Excellent. That's what we want to see from him. Booker and Durant as the 2 main scoring outlets there. DeAndre Ayton was 7 of 10, 16 points, 16 rebounds, very efficient there. The bench seems a little bit worrisome. Damian Lee, Cameron Payne, TJ Ward, Torrey Craig, and Jock Landale, the reserve center there, received extended time. Well, I guess not too much extended time in the long run, but more time than they get in certainly a playoff rotation, as Durant would play more time. But not sure what the final rotation would be there come playoff time for sure. Darius Baisley, who was brought over as part of a trade package as well at the deadline, didn't play but could play moving forward. He hasn't made his debut in a Suns uniform yet. He could play 4 or 5 position. I assume he'd play center. They'll have just under 20 games to kind of sort through the rotations here in the minutes. Kevin Durant played 26:50, I believe, so about 27 minutes. 10 for 15 overall. Had a big surge in the fourth quarter where he scored 9 straight at one point. He's getting to his mid-range spots there, just where he likes at the elbow, knocking down shots. Finished with 23 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, in about a dozen minutes fewer than he'd get probably in a prime game or a playoff typical game. Now, Chris Paul's role is going to be more of a table setter moving forward, which is great because some of the shooting issues were more apparent, certainly more apparent the other night. 1 for 8 from the field for 2 points, 11 assists. He's shooting just under 43% right now. That's second lowest of his career. Now he's averaging, fewest points in his 19 seasons as well. He's 37% from 3, but that's 1.6 makes per game. So that's a high percentage on a low volume. So that's not great there. But I know it was viewed as a Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant super quartet there from the all the social media posts and to those whom are casually watch basketball. But the more realistic piece to this is it's going to be Booker and Durant hitting the big shots. DeAndre Ayton sure is a integral piece in the middle there on both sides of the ball, and you got to be kind of worried about their depth on the interior there, especially on the defensive side. The defense was really horrible against the Hornets and allowing that team, especially without Lonzo Ball, and this could be the team with the worst record in the entire league, and they were still putting up points here late into the game. But it'll be more Chris Paul kind of setting the other two main scorers up, and hopefully DeAndre Ayton providing some efficient scoring in the block as well. And again, figuring out the bench there and some of the defensive stuff. And 19 games, I believe, left to play before the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how everything kind of comes together. They won't have, everything sorted, full minutes for Durant. Maybe he still sits out some games. But realistically, by the time we hit the playoffs, there might only be 10 games, 12 games that this team has really experimented and had complete performances with everyone healthy and kind of playing the rotations and stuff they want to see. So we could still see kind of a rusty team heading into the playoffs. Rusty team coming together, I should say, heading into the playoffs. But it'll be very interesting to see how it is heading forward. But Kevin Durant looks good. Devin Booker looks good. Chris Paul settling into a reduced scoring load role. Ayton looks efficient and looks just great. Durant looks pretty much like everything you'd hoped he'd be when trading for him, and like an integral piece of this team moving forward for a hopeful deep run into the NBA playoffs, and a must-watch team night to night to see what they can produce moving forward. Let's transition now to college hoops and Anthony Davis, who should break the NCAA all-time men's scoring record as I'm recording this tonight. He's 27 points away in his career. He currently has 3,642. He's just behind Pete Maravich at 3,667. He's averaging over 28 points per game. Detroit Mercy has been struggling his entire career there. They're currently 14-18 this season after beating Purdue Fort Wayne. Purdue Fort Wayne. There we go. In the Horizon League tournament on Tuesday, 81-68. He had 38 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists. If they lose at any point this season, his career could be over, and so will his opportunity be to add to that total and move into first place. So winning Monday and putting up the points that he did and moving on to Thursday have been a big deal. He's in his 5th year after the extra COVID year and considered transferring this past season, including to a couple of different Power 5 programs, but ultimately decided to finish his playing career under his father as the head coach there at Detroit Mercy. 18-19 season was his first year there, and he was known for his great three-point shooting. Still is. 584 made in his career. Good free throw shooter as well. 143 games played. And of course, as you look up and down the scoring records all time, number of games played, 3-point line era, post and pre, free throws, all kinds of things will be looked at in as to whether or not this is a big deal to a lot of folks in the scoring era. But really, having a new person move into first place, regardless of how long it took, whether three-pointers were a piece of that or not, is still, I think, a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. They do have to travel to Youngstown, Ohio to play the favorites to win the tournament and get the auto bid in Youngstown State. They're 23-8, 15-5 overall. If Detroit Mercy doesn't win there and probably win the next two games to grab the auto bid and go to the NCAA tournament auto bid there, they are not good enough to make the NIT and probably not the Basketball Classic, which was formerly called the CIT. That's the other postseason tournament, the third one, which is a step behind the NIT. That was canceled in 2020 and 2021. Fresno State was the winner last season when it was rebranded, relaunched, and started again for the first time since 2019. Just a few notes on that for those that don't usually watch it, such as myself. I had to do some back research here. The Bulldogs last year entered at 19-13. They were 6th in the Mountain West Conference, 8-9 overall conference play. That's how they landed a bid there. Coastal Carolina Chanticleers was the team that they beat in the finals. They were 16-13 and 8-8 in conference play in the Sun Belt, 7th place to make the tournament. Detroit Mercy did participate last season at 14-15 overall, so they had a losing record last year and got an invite ultimately before getting crushed by Florida Gulf Coast in the opening round / kind of the second round because of the weird structure they have there. 18 teams, so they have to have two kind of play-in games to cut the field down to 16 to make it nice, even numbers to advance from there. So they were in that kind of full first round after the initial play-in games. 7 of the original 18 teams that were offered invitations made it in. 11 other teams either declined or withdrew before play actually began. So it's not, quite frankly, it's not a highly known about tournament to begin with, or highly perceived. It hasn't been since it started running, I believe, in the early 2010s. Again, it's been rebranded and relaunched as of last season after 2 years off. I don't think Detroit Mercy was even a top pick last season after 60% of the field basically was reselected. They were one of 4 teams in that final 18-team field with losing records to participate. Point is, it's not a sure thing that they'd even make that again, and every game is very important to Detroit Mercy, both in trying to get that scoring record for Antonie Davis and trying to continue its season into postseason play. Now, all the tournament games are played on ESPN+. They're played on off nights from the NCAA tournament and NIT. So while those are being played on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I believe these are more early week games, if I'm not mistaken. And it's just not a highly publicized tournament, certainly at all. And these are teams that are, Fresno State's a surprise to even be in there as kind of a second tier, borderline third tier group of college basketball teams there in Division I. Last year's participants were Appalachian State, Eastern Washington, Kent State, Maryland Eastern Shore, Morgan State, New Orleans, Portland, teams out of the Southland, Big Sky, Big South, Summit League, in addition to a little bit more known, partially because they play football in the Mountain West Conference USA Sun Belt. So we do have a lot of smaller teams. And squads like Oakland, Samford, Sam Houston State declined invitations, while Wofford, Merrimack did withdraw before entering their contests. So just another tournament to be aware of. And Detroit Mercy and Antonie Davis going for the all-time career points record holding title there on Thursday on ESPN Plus in a big game for that team. Let's talk college football rule changes that could go into effect as soon as this season. Of course, we're going to have a few things different with 2023 college basketball, starting with some of the conference realignments in a more serious shape going into effect. Every year, we've had pretty much at least one Division I AA or FCS level school, bump up a level here. Last year it was James Madison in their first year, so we're used to that. And we've had a little bit of movement here and there with teams realigning. But this upcoming season, of course, we're going to have big shifts in the Big 12, in the American Conference and Conference USA to kind of make accommodations for teams moving around. In the next couple years, we will have a expanded playoff, and Texas and Oklahoma are looking to get out of their Big 12 deal early and move on to the SEC, and then UCLA and USC are furthest down the line that we know for sure is going to happen so far, and that may be 3 or 4 years out still. But right now, let's look at just some rule changes. 3 out of 4 of the proposed rules that have come down the pike here have strong support to go into effect. Safety and reducing total number of plays that expose players to injury, both over a weekly basis and over a season, was some of the push for these rules. Games right now are averaging 3 hours and 27-ish minutes. About 180 plays in college, 154 in the NFL on average. So a lot of these are to reduce the time played and some of the plays in college football games. At least that's the guise that has been used by the NCAA, although every college football reporter has more or less stated that it's really TV money, fitting in advertisements, fitting games into more realistic windows, even though everyone wants to fit college football that has such high ratings into 12-hour blocks or 8-hour blocks, whatever their designated time is every Saturday. They want to fit more seamlessly into those windows for a more smoother transition from game to game, fit those advertising dollars in, and in order to do that, they kind of want to slim the game down a bit. So this is what we're looking at right now. The first suggestion was a rule that would prevent teams from taking consecutive timeouts one after the other, such as when you see a team ice another's kicker for an end of the half, end of the game, whatever, field goal. Not a bad rule at all, it would appear. Certainly not one you'd miss in every single game. Certainly we see extensions of plays like this that seem to drag on and on just to see a field goal get kicked, and doesn't seem like a bad rule at all. Second one, not extending quarters. This is a rule that, again, will not be effective very often. For first or third quarters, they would not be extended for an on-time down if the quarter ends on a defensive penalty. In this case, the down would be clocked in the next quarter. So if there's a defensive penalty at the end of the first quarter of the game, you don't play an on-timed quarter, then go to commercial break, then come back. Instead, you let the quarter end, go to your commercial break, come back, resume play, starting with that untimed down, I do believe. So not something you'd miss too much. It just tends to push off that commercial break, and I guess that's the assumption is it'll cut down some time. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that one. Not something you'd miss in every single game or most games or even weekly on the college football slate. Just not that big of a deal. The next one is a running clock. On this rule, a running clock would continue after an offense gains a first down, except on 2 minutes inside of a half. This is the NFL rule. The clock would not stop on a first down, except with 2 minutes to go in the half. That sounds good to me. That will certainly change the dynamics, at least a little bit initially, of how teams are moving, and certainly end of the game, end of the quarter situations, and trying to score towards the end. But it's, again, we see it be executed in the NFL, and it'll be executed similarly in college football. Something that diehards like myself watching will certainly notice, and that it seems like it would kind of flawlessly be integrated into your normal viewing experience after maybe a few weeks. I mean, we forget you can take a knee on punts when the ball's inside the 20-yard line and then start at the 20-yard line. It seems like that rule was just come up with 2 years ago now, and that's a regular part of the game that we don't even think about now. You don't have to return every single kick to have a decent field position or respectable field position around the 20-yard line to start a drive. seems reasonable enough to prevent injuries. In this particular case, it's to keep the clock running a little bit, take some plays out of the game, and to prevent injuries. I'm not in favor of just cutting plays to cut plays. Again, trying to shorten the game, ultimately to fit in TV time and games into windows is what's the ultimate drive here. We'll see about this one. A lot of support again on this. I don't think we'll miss it that much, and it's easier to enjoy the experience thinking in terms of NFL football and college football in same terms in this particular case. Now, this fourth one, not a lot of support as of right now. Probably won't go through and is a lot to take in. Another running clock. The clock will continue to run after an incomplete pass once the ball has been spotted for play. The clock will continue to run after an incomplete pass. So the clock will continue to run when you run the ball, when you complete a pass in bounds. It would continue to run with an incomplete pass. It would continue to run, theoretically, if it passed with the other rule, after you gained a first down. So pretty much the clock would just be running all of the time, unless you went out of bounds or we were in between possessions or change of possession, pretty much. And this would cut a lot of plays out of the game. It would completely change how teams ran their offenses throughout games, and especially towards the end. It would make it more difficult for teams to come from behind. It would make it easier and less challenging for teams that were already ahead that try to run the ball to take time off the clock. Now you can throw too. It would change the dynamic of college football in general, certainly. So this one is certainly more controversial and not one that seems like it'll pass, nor one that I think we really want to see right now. Now the first running clock rule, the third one out of the four here, where it continues to run after picking up a first down once the ball is spotted, similar to the NFL rule. It's estimated that will only cut about 8 plays out per game in 10 minutes. That seems acceptable and not like the worst thing. It does seem a little crazy that we aren't just playing commercials side by side with field goals, which were hit at about a 97% rate last year. Or we could cut, 15 to 20 minutes per game out on challenges. That seems like the most obvious thing to take out. And one of the first things that a lot of folks suggest is, why don't we put a timer on the officials in making a decision? I mean, we all watch the games on our television and are able to kind of make calls. And then it's the announcers, which sometimes are wrong. They're wrong sometimes, quite frankly. Sometimes we get the head official from a separate remote booth that comes in and gives his opinion as well. And it's completely different from what the announcers state, or it's controversial in its own right, or it's completely different than what's ultimately ruled on the field. It just seems like if you're sitting at home in your subpar television sometimes, and you can make a call, that all the officials watching in remote sites, as all these games are, can make a quick enough assessment to buzz into the field officials at each of these games and just say, hey, we're going to go with this ruling. First down, not first down, catch, no catch. We can't make a determination. Stick with this call, whatever, and move on, rather than multiple times every single game having to review different spots, different all kinds of things in the field. That seems like it'd be the most obvious to take out, is extended replays. But that is not the case. We have the 4 rules that have been presented. Again, the 3 that are looking like right now that would probably pass: no consecutive timeouts, a running clock rule similar to the NFL, where we will no longer just stop it on first downs. We're going to keep the clock running, except at the 2-minute mark. And on the rare chance you get a defensive penalty at the end of a first or third quarter with no time remaining on the clock, we're not going to play that play right there. We're just going to go ahead and head into the next quarter and play it then, which is, again, probably the one that's least likely to impact the game at all. If this other one comes up, this other clock running rule, about the clock running after incompletions, that would really be something else. And that would certainly make waves. You'd certainly hear about it someplace else other than this podcast, is it would be all over sports headlines everywhere. So you would hear about that long before you hear it on this podcast, probably. But just to note, those are the rule changes we're looking at heading into the college football season for 2023 that look like they will go through to shorten the game just a little bit there. Nothing too crazy, I don't think, in the long run. Just of note, the running clock once you get a first down. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But I'll certainly do a recap podcast of the 2021 season this summer, as I did last year for 2020, and a preseason, both for myself and for you guys, covering some of the rules, the conference realignments, the preseason, that kind of deal, in a few months. Small conference tournaments are happening now. Major conference tournaments are happening next week for college basketball selection show coming up, of course, followed by the tournament in about a week and a half. So I'll be discussing a lot of that. Super excited. NBA is winding down as well, the final quarter there. So thanks for tuning in. We'll talk hoops much more coming up next week. Thank you.